Get us
Picture a
another
Friday
round,
evening.
Geordie.
I'm telling you, it's the best bitter in the Sarnie.
You're pushing
You
open
couldn't
the
hit a
door
barn
of your
door
local,
from 5
and the smell
paces.
hits you first.
Another round, landlord.
Yeasty, slightly woody smell
Yeah,
of
put
real
a bitter
ale
on for Trevor too. He's still going on
soaking
about the
into
match.
The carpet, hanging in the cigarette smoke. The bar's heaving. Someone's feeding coins into the jukebox. The landlord nods. He already knows what you're having. Britain and beer. The two are almost inseparable. For centuries, the pub wasn't just where you went to drink. It was where you went to live. To talk, to argue, to celebrate, to grieve. And the beer in your glass wasn't just a drink either. It was local. It was personal. It told you exactly where you were in the country. By the 1970s, there were hundreds of regional breweries still operating across England, Scotland and Wales. Families had been drinking the same ales for generations. Your dad drank it. His dad drank it before him. The brand on the pump was as familiar as a neighbour's face. Then came consolidation, takeovers, the big six swallowing the small ones. Recipes changed, breweries closed, and one by one, the beers that defined a generation quietly disappeared from the bar. Today, we're bringing 10 of them back. 10 old British beers that only true Brits will remember. Beers with history, character, and the kind of loyal following that no marketing department could ever manufacture. 1. Watney's Red Barrel. You cannot talk about British beer history without mentioning Watney's Red Barrel. In the 1960s, this keg bitter was everywhere. Watney Man pushed it hard. Television adverts, pub takeovers, nationwide distribution. By 1971, it had become one of the most recognised beer brands in Britain. It was also, famously, one of the most loathed. Smooth, fizzy, and served cold, Red Barrel was the opposite of everything traditional cask ale stood for. The Campaign for Real Ale, CAMRA, was actually founded in 1971 partly in direct response to beers like this one. Grotneys, people called it. Gangrene. The nicknames weren't kind. But here's the thing. Millions of people drank it. Millions more remember it.
Another round then.
Whatever its critics
right
say,
away, lads.
Red Barrel
Cheers, mate.
was Britain in a glass, mid-century, modernising, not always pretty, but undeniably part of the story. Ear 2, Younger's Tartan Special. North of the border, one beer reigned in the working men's clubs and corner pubs of Scotland. William Younger's Tartan Special. Brewed in Edinburgh, this amber-coloured Scottish heavy was the kind of pint your grandfather ordered without looking at the board. It was unpretentious, straightforward, malty and smooth with just enough bitterness to remind you it was proper beer. In the 1970s
this beer's no
and
bad.
1980s,
Right enough. Better than the
couldn't
last.
walk into a
Slunty.
pub in Glasgow or Edinburgh without seeing the tartan font on the bar. Scottish and Newcastle eventually absorbed Youngers, and Tartan Special faded into near obscurity, but those who remember it still talk about it with a particular fondness, the kind of loyalty you can't fake. The 3, Bass Charrington's Worthington E. In the Midlands and across much of England in the early 1970s, if you asked for a pint of E, everyone knew exactly what you meant. Worthington E, the E standing simply for extra, was a light, accessible keg bitter from the Bass Charrington Empire. It came in those distinctive amber bottles too. A Worthington E on a Sunday lunchtime, the roast going in the oven, the football results crackling on the radio. That was British life. That was 1973. Bass eventually phased it out as brands were rationalised through the 1980s. But for a generation of Midlands drinkers, Worthington E wasn't just a beer, it was a ritual. It a 4, Mackeson Stout. Not every great British beer was a bitter. Mackeson Stout, brewed originally in Hythe, Kent, was something altogether different. Dark, creamy, with a sweetness that came from lactose added to the brewing process, Mackeson was the milk stout that conquered a nation. In the 1950s and 1960s, it was even marketed as a health drink. Each pint contains the energising carbohydrates of 10 Oz of prime dairy milk, the adverts claimed. Whether or not you believed that, the taste was undeniably comforting, rich and chocolatey, almost a meal in a glass. Women who wouldn't normally set foot near a bitter would order a Mackerson. Elderly relatives sipped it by the fire. It was gentle. It was warming. It was entirely its own thing. Whitbread kept it going for decades, but by the 2000s it had dwindled to almost nothing in British pubs, a ghost of its former self. Beer 5, Mann's Brown Ale, Mann's Original Brown Ale, the bottle with the red and gold label, sweet, dark and slightly nutty. It was one of the best-selling bottled beers in Britain through much of the 20th century. Children, yes, genuinely, were sometimes given a splash in a glass on special occasions. That's
I'm the
how
double
mild
diamond
and
man,
sweet
confident
it
and
was.
true. A double diamond
Mann's
works
dated back
wonders,
to
so will you.
1902. Over 100 years of British drinking history in a single brown bottle. By the 1980s, it was still shifting millions of cases, but the shift away from sweeter, darker beers was well underway. It still exists today, technically, but the brand is a shadow of what it once was. Here's 6. Double Diamond. Picture this. It's 1972. You're watching the telly and up comes an advert. A man in a hard hat. A catchy jingle. Double Diamond works wonders, the voiceover sings. You'd heard it 100 times. You probably hummed it without thinking. Double Diamond was one of the most heavily marketed beers in British history. Ind Coop pushed it relentlessly throughout the 1960s and 70s. Keg bitter, widely available, instantly recognisable by its diamond logo. In 1976, during Britain's famous drought summer with temperatures hitting 32 degrees Celsius, Double Diamond sales went through the roof. Camera despised it, of course. It was everything traditional brewers fought against. But ordinary punters didn't care about the culture war. They just wanted a cold pint on a hot day. And Double Diamond was always there. Beer 7. Davenport's Home Brewery. Not every great British beer came from a national giant. Davenport's of Birmingham was something special. A brewery that in the 1950s and 60s actually delivered beer to your doorstep. The Davenport's dray horse, the familiar clink of bottles on the step. Beer at home wasn't just a slogan, it was a service. Their bitter was proper West Midlands real ale. Amber, hoppy, with a dry finish that went perfectly with a bag of crisps and a Saturday afternoon on the sofa. Thousands of Birmingham families were loyal Davenport's customers for decades. The brewery closed in 1986. The home delivery service had already gone. And with it went something irreplaceable. A local institution, a community fixture, a taste of Birmingham that belonged to no one else. Here 8. Webster's Yorkshire Bitter. Up in Yorkshire, where opinions about beer are held with something approaching religious conviction, Webster's was the name on everyone's lips. Brewed in Halifax since 1838, Webster's Yorkshire Bitter was exactly what it said on the label: brisk, no nonsense, and unapologetically northern.
Long shift
in the
that
late
were.
1980s,
Ansell's
it was one
Mile
of the
coming
top
up.
5 selling
Tell,
bitters
mate.
in Britain. Around 28 million pints a year. Half the pubs in the north had it on tap. You didn't choose Webster's because of a marketing campaign. You chose it because it was yours. It was local. It was proud. Grand Metropolitan took over. Then Scottish and Newcastle. The Halifax brewery closed in 1996. The recipe was tweaked, the brand diluted, the connection to place severed. It's still technically available in some form. But Yorkshire's own? That's long gone. 9. Ansell's Mild. In the Black Country and across the West Midlands, mild ale was king, and the king of milds was Ansell's. Dark, smooth, low in alcohol, around 3. 2%. and absolutely ideal for a weeknight after a shift at the factory or the foundry. You could drink 3 or 4 pints and still walk home straight. Ansell's Brewery had been part of Birmingham life since 1857. At its peak in the early 1970s, it employed over 1,000 people. The smell from the brewery drifted across whole neighbourhoods on brew days. Children grew up knowing that smell. Allied breweries stripped it back. A bitter workers' strike in 1981 over proposed redundancies became one of the most notable industrial disputes in the British drinks industry. The brewery eventually closed in 1981. For those communities, it wasn't just jobs that were lost, it was identity. Dear 10, Flowers Original. And finally, Flowers Original Bitter from Stratford-upon-Avon. Yes, Shakespeare's hometown once had its own celebrated brewery. The Flower family had been brewing in Stratford since 1831. Their pale ales and bitters were well regarded across the Midlands, and the brewery itself was eventually taken over by Whitbread in 1954. Flowers Original survived the takeover for decades, kept going as a regional brand. If you were in Warwickshire in the 1970s, you knew it. Amber-coloured, floral, with a gentle bitterness, it tasted of the Avon Valley on a summer evening. By the 1990s, the Stratford brewery had gone. The brand lingered for a while, brewed elsewhere, the connection to place purely nostalgic. Another great British regional beer, reduced to a memory. 10 beers, 10 stories, each one rooted in a place, a community, a way of life that has mostly gone. We had fewer choices then. The beer menu was short. But what those pints gave us, the ritual, the familiarity, the sense of belonging to something local, somehow felt like more. If you remember any of these beers, if you ever stood at a bar and ordered a Mackeson for your nan, or sank a pint of Ansell's after a long week, or hummed that double diamond jingle without meaning to, you know exactly what I mean. These weren't just brands, they were part of who we were. If this brought back memories, share it with someone who remembers. Those stories deserve to be told, and they deserve to be heard. Please subscribe to keep these stories alive. New videos every week about the Britain we knew and loved. And drop a comment below. Which of these beers did you drink? And which pub do you wish you could walk back into one more time?